Hello, everyone. We are just waiting for everyone to join us. We're going to get started in just a minute or so, but welcome. We'll be with you shortly. Hi, everyone. It looks like the participant numbers are leveling off, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in and get started. Welcome to the second webinar in a series about the initiative regarding succession planning for cultural institutions. This is a collaborative project between the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts and Lyrasis, funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And we'll tell you a little bit more about the project itself in a moment. But this is following up on a webinar from about a week and a half ago, where we gave a little bit more background and information about the initiative itself. This program today is going to be focused on sharing all of the resources that we have created to date. There will be more to come, so this is kind of just a snapshot in time, but we have enough that we're excited to share with you now. So just by way of a little bit more introduction, my name is Dyani Feige. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Director of Preservation Services at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. So the Conservation Center, or CCAHA, is a nonprofit conservation treatment facility and preservation resource organization. We've been in place since 1977. We are located in Philadelphia, but we work on a national scale, so all over the US. Our conservators work on the treatment of paper-based collections materials. So anything and everything with a paper focus, from books to photographic materials to archival collections, and even historic paper predecessors like parchment and papyrus. We have a digital imaging lab where we create digital facsimiles, both of some of the objects that our conservators have treated and collections that come in just for that. And we have a housing and framing studio where we create preservation grade packaging for collections materials. And my department, Preservation Services, we are really the education and outreach wing of the Conservation Center. We are the folks working out in the field. We do a lot of work directly with organizations, consulting on preservation needs and risks, and we coordinate all of the Conservation Center's educational programs. So I'm going to turn this over for a moment to my colleague, Tom Clareson, to introduce his organization and initiative. And I'm also going to turn my video off. I'll pop back on towards the end when we do a Q&A, but we're excited to have you with us. So Tom, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Dyani. Well, I appreciate having the introduction here, and I'm Tom Clareson. My pronouns are he, him, and just for a quick visual description, I am a white male with glasses, brownish black hair, and a blue button-down shirt on, and I have white walls with a number of different graphics on the wall and back of me. And today I'm representing both Lyrasis, the Library, Archive, and Museum Network, where I serve as Senior Consultant for Digital and Preservation Services, and also Performing Arts Readiness, which is a project that is sponsored by Lyrasis, but our funding comes from the Mellon Foundation. And so to talk a little bit more about PAR on our next slide, just wanted to show the resources that we have. We work with both producing and presenting organizations, and importantly, we work with organizations that both have bricks and mortar facilities and those that are traveling organizations and companies that may move from building to building, site to site. We do a lot of work through our website at performingartsreadiness.org, and we also have a number of templates and tools available. And I think the biggest thing here is that we have training. We have a series of about 20 free webinars that are offered 3 times a year live, and also offered 24/7, 365 in a recorded version at our website. We have international experts talking on a whole lot of topics related to disaster preparedness and recovery for arts organizations, but we're also looking at archiving and other types of topics for arts organizations as well. We do have a variety of grants that are available, so please take a look at the website if you'd like to. Through my work with PAR and my work with Lyrasis, I've seen the need for succession planning. So I definitely am glad to be working with CCAHA on this project. And I will send things back over to Dyani to talk a little bit about some of the contextual aspects of the project, and then I'll give you a little bit of background on it as well.
Yeah, so I mostly just wanted to mention, as I shared previously, that this webinar is the second in a series. We did a program on, I believe it was June 28th, that gave more of an introduction and a background to the succession planning initiative overall. We are going to go through a little bit of the broad strokes information about the project, but for more of an introduction and background, you should definitely check out the recorded webinar, which is available on the Conservation Center's Wikipedia, or I'm sorry, not Wikipedia, the Conservation Center's YouTube page. So please check that out. And yeah, as Tom mentioned, this project dates back, and I know Tom will give a little more context, but I can kind of start things off. This project dates back to a few years ago. Really, it came to kind of a head in the midst of and in the aftermath, be that what it may, of the COVID-19 pandemic and the associated shutdowns of collecting and other cultural organizations. We really recognized that there was a lack of knowledge transfer in the collections care level of staff individuals. So, you know, when succession planning projects and resources have been put together for cultural and other and collecting institutions in the past, it's mostly been focused at the administrative level, the executive level, the board, but not necessarily those folks who are actually undertaking the care of the day-to-day care and management of the collections. So the next couple slides were in the previous program as well, but just for a little bit more of a recap, I'm going to turn it back over to Tom to describe the overview of the project.
Sure, great. We have been working with CCAHA to look at really serving a wide variety of organizations. It started out really focusing on museums, historical societies, archives, and libraries, and then because of the needs that we were discovering through the PAR project, we wanted to include arts organizations in all of our research activities as well as resource creation activities. So what we've done is we had a number of focus group listening sessions and did a project survey to learn about succession planning strategies that have worked and those that may have not, or what organizations that have not put the strategies into place were feeling and thinking about how to move forward in this. And one of the more interesting things was that we started out with the idea of having about 5 or 6 of our listening sessions and ended up having 16 of them. We got a lot of good information from there, and then we had a really successful survey as well. And what we've tried to do is answer many of the questions, many of the calls, and as many of the topics that people said we really would like to have some more resources to lean on and to think about in these areas. So we're looking at what good practice strategies are there that are already out there, and what are some things that we can bring in from other resources and sort of mold to the cultural and arts world. We've had a wonderful set of opportunities to work with our national advisory panel, who have really been helping us be able to get out in the public and talk about these programs. And we also have, and can always use more, reviewer volunteers that are testing our draft resources and letting us know, oh, you might need to emphasize, this point or that point a little bit more. So that generally is some of the activity in the project. And then I just wanted to talk for a moment about our timeline, because you'll see a couple of things that have sort of come up in 2024 and are continuing. So the listening sessions, we ended up really moving from a 4-month to 8 or 9 month period to do those, and then had our survey last fall. And once we came out of the surveys and listening sessions, we did a lot of analysis of those activities and started to look at what we should focus on for the resources. So we are in 2024 running these webinars. We're doing a lot of conference presentations coming up. We've got the Western Arts Alliance, we've got the American Association for State and Local History, and we're also working with the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums to do really, fairly specific and focused conference presentations there. Our website has been launched and already updated a couple of different times with more and more of these resources coming in. And I actually put this bottom bullet on here because we are continuing to develop resources. And toward the end of the session today, we're going to talk with you and say, okay, you've seen some of the things that we have in place now. What are some of the other resources that you think would be helpful to have as a result of this project? Because we're really focusing on that as we are moving forward. And I think I can pass things back over to Dyani to start really showing some of the resources.
Yes, so as Tom mentioned, we have a website devoted to this initiative. My colleague Camilla has been sharing links in the chat as we go along, and I realized I should also mention that there will be a PDF version of this PowerPoint sent out to everyone who registered afterwards, with all of the links are hyperlinked within the PDF, so you can access it directly through that as well. If you are watching this recording in the future and you were not registered in the first place and would like to have a PDF sent out, our email addresses will be at the end. You are more than welcome to just connect with us and request that, and we can make it happen. But so yeah, there's not a huge amount to say here other than that the website is live. There is some of the same background information and resources, including a list of our advisory panel up on the website. So definitely Please check it out after this program if you are so inclined. And we're really just going to jump in and start sharing out the resources. So the resources that we have developed so far, we have broken them into two overall categories: tools and templates, and then written resources and guidelines. And I'm going to share the tools and templates, and then Tom is going to share most of the written resources. So the difference here is pretty self-explanatory, but really being the tools and templates, these are documents that you can actually download and edit, add your own information in here. These are meant to be usable tools for initiating some of these succession planning projects. So bear with me for just a moment while I switch my share to the website itself. Tom, will you give me a thumbs up? Can you see my browser now rather than the PowerPoint? Okay. So yes, this is the website with, as I mentioned, the project background. There also is, we haven't really talked about, this was much more heavily focused on the previous webinar. There are findings from our listening sessions, as well as a written survey that we sent out. So all of those findings and feedback is available there. And then if you click through to the resources and tools, you will get the list of resources. So it's not in exactly the same order that we're going to be talking about it now. So I'm going to just be going to other tabs to share these. Hold on just a sec. I'm trying to move my Zoom bar. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be talking about is not the job analysis template. The first thing we're going to be talking about is actually the only one that doesn't open as its own browser window. This will automatically download another document, and that is the RISI chart for succession planning. So last time I'll do this, I promise, but bear with me again. 1 sec while I actually open that document. Is okay, so this template supports succession planning by examining the division of labor between roles in a department or organization. It's as you can see, it downloads as an Excel document, so it is fully meant to be edited and filled in. What you're doing is you're encouraged to map out who is responsible, accountable, informed, and consulted for and regarding various areas of work. So it is broken down into how things are currently handled and another tab for the ideal. So the template itself looks the same, but you might recognize by if you complete this for regarding the different tasks and responsibilities, the matrix may be able to highlight areas of imbalance or need. So these are just examples here regarding some of the potential tasks that collections care and management individuals might be taking on. And as you can see over in these columns here, these are for the different individuals in the various roles. So what you're really identifying is who is actually doing the work, who is maybe accountable for the work, but not necessarily taking on the actual tasks, who is informed at every step of the way, and who might be consulted, but not necessarily actively involved with these tasks. So again, a good outcome of this would be able to see where there are maybe potential imbalances and be able to shift accordingly. Going back to the website where everything else lives, the next thing we're going to be talking about is a job analysis template. This opens as a PDF, but you can download it in a fillable PDF format. So this template supports succession planning by examining key job tasks, functions, connections, and expertise. It's a really helpful tool to go through when you are looking to update job descriptions, get a clear understanding of what exactly are on different individuals' plates, and just making sure you have a clear understanding of how things are laid out and actively happening in practice. So you would fill this out for each different role at your organization. Each role should be examined in relation to the larger goals of the department and how the department interacts with other parts of the organization, if that is applicable. Again, here, these are all just samples and examples that you can update and change to fit the actual responsibilities of your organization and department, pre-populated with some sample examples. And I should mention, if folks have questions, please, about any of these resources, please enter them in the chat as we go. Again, Camilla is linking directly to all the resources, but and then the last one I'm going to talk about before turning things back over to Tom briefly is this succession risk advocacy matrix. So this is really a tool that would potentially be of use for making the case to organizational leadership, including potentially board members or upper level administration. Sometimes leadership responds well to, I don't want to say a threat, but the looking at things in the framework of risk management. So what is the risk if something does not actually play out the way that it is supposed to? If an individual wins the lottery and suddenly leaves their job and for whatever reason is completely uncommunicative, what would the actual impact to the organization be on the mission, the financial impact, including, dollars, finances, but other resources as well, I think is important to look at here. And the impact on time of other individuals. So this matrix prompts thinking about the impact on key measures of concern. And again, you would want to review this exercise for each position on your staff in order to get kind of the totality of risk. At the bottom, the scale is completely up to you and how you want to customize it to your needs and organization. But say if 5 is the greatest or 10 is the greatest, you add those numbers all up here to get a total risk at the bottom. And again, these are just example responsibilities and tasks. Other types of organizations might wish to substitute or add other different dimensions that reflect their operations, but just kind of a list to get you started. This is another one that it's linked as a PDF, but you can download it. Actually, I don't know if you can download this one as a fillable PDF, but you should be able to. You can. Okay, thanks, Tom. So, all right, I am going to move just very briefly on to the next slide where we introduce all of the guides and written resources. Tom is going to take most of this away, but just to give you a sense of the list we are looking at here. And
Yeah.
Tom, are you ready for me to go back to the website?
I think so. Sure. Let's go
Okay.
ahead. we've got a couple of things that are, quite sort of easy ways to start considering some of the aspects of what we're talking about here. And then we will have a couple of, again, documents, tools, and things that can help in a number of cases as we go through. So one of the things that Dyani just mentioned and that is really important is trying to make sure the board is involved in staff succession planning. In our survey and in our focus groups especially, we heard people saying, oh, we're very interested as staff, as individuals on the staff in succession planning, but we don't know if our board is as interested as they should be. So we have just a couple of key questions to get the board involved. What is the risk? What is at risk if we don't plan for staff transitions and succession? And what we've been told in our discussions is that the continuation, the continuity of your organization is something that's at risk. Do we know who would handle critical responsibilities if a staff member were suddenly unavailable? I have seen many cases, actually far too many cases that I've even been personally involved with, where board members end up picking up the responsibilities. So knowing what those responsibilities are, taking some of the tools that Dyani just showed us and mapping those out can be very helpful. Who's managing and owning the succession planning and knowledge transfer process? Well, the board needs to have some ownership. I think, otherwise you may get surprised if, things are going forward and you're not plugged in as to what's happening with the recruiting process, what's happening with hiring, what's happening with especially onboarding. And we're going to focus on that onboarding as we go along. And then these last two things were pieces that we really heard quite a bit in our listening sessions. How can we assure that succession planning and knowledge transfer aren't just a one-time activity, but an ongoing mindset and regular practice? And this is a way, again, to have some level of continuity and make sure that once you go through this process, it might be difficult the first time, how can you make it easier both to hire new people in and even if there are just changes between departments and divisions? And this last point here, how can we link succession planning across the staff with the organization's strategic goals and objectives? This has been something that we got a lot of questions about, but now we're starting to hear organizations saying we are actually thinking about including succession planning in the goals, objectives, and activities that we're outlining. When we're redeveloping our strategic plan, we are developing succession plannings as well. So these are all good things to think about from a staff, leadership, and board position. And in addition to that, our next piece that we'll go to is this sort of idea of 10 things that you can do now to support succession planning. And so, again, we have some really interesting graphics and steps here. But the whole aspect of this project that we talked about is this sort of what would happen if different staff left, if there was a certain amount of time, certain period where staff was not available. Record important passwords in a secured IT approved manner. I hate to admit this, but I actually literally had my dog eating a password list at one point, and I was thinking, how am I going to get these all back? And I had to change a lot of passwords. So talk to your IT folks. They probably will say, don't write them down, don't let your dog around them, but that's important to consider and to think about. Even as simple as locating and designating physical keys, this idea of key control and security control can be very helpful. You wouldn't believe how many times our listening session folks said, yeah, when the staff member left, some of the keys to some of our storage areas disappeared. Document critical internal and external contacts. I think The best focus we had on this topic was at the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums, when they said that these contacts and the relationships and partnerships are one of the most important things that an organization can build. So we have to be ready to continue those as quickly as we possibly can. Um, and let me see what Heather has to say here. When coming in as a new employee for a museum that hasn't considered succession planning, how would you recommend implementing these initiatives as they also familiarize themselves with a collection? Heather, that is a great question, and we will actually bring that up with another one of our resources in just a minute. And I hope Heath, I'm sorry, I hope that will be a type of tool that you can use. So please take a look at that while we're scrolling through that in a minute, and let me know if that works in a worthwhile way. We want to be able to identify the next person up for emergency situations. And this is something, who is going to be in the understudy slot as far as jobs are concerned. For those of us in the arts, we see understudies in our performances a lot. Who would the understudies be for the staff roles? Where are the policies to be created or updated? One of the first things that we heard when we were doing our both focus groups and our survey was that there were a whole wide swath of policies that needed to be created because some organizations said, oh, we had not thought about those. And luckily, there is a wonderful tool that CCAHA has developed and used in the past, which Dyani will talk about in a bit, that can help with a lot of collections-based and archives-based policy development. Record details about special projects, anything tied to special funding sources, anything tied to grants. If you have a gap between leaders of 2 or 3 months, or a period where somebody is getting spun up on the projects of the institution, depending on the deadline for the end of your grant, that can be a really important time to make sure that you're continuing on that project. So look at those. Create a table of contents for a knowledge transfer guide, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along as well, and some timelines for filling it. There is a wonderful resource that I'll mention here that was put together by the National Coalition for Arts Preparedness and Emergency Response, also called NCAPER, and they have at their website, ncaper.org, they have a tool called Organizations at a Crossroads, and they talk a lot about this knowledge transfer guide. And we'll talk about our bibliography, and the OAX, or Organizations at a Crossroads, is also in there. And I think the most important thing, tell someone or several people where to find the information above. So let's go on to our next resource, and that is in the area of oral history and using that as a knowledge transfer guide. And this is a really interesting resource. It's something that Camilla, who's hosting the session today, developed, and it has sort of taken on a life of its own. When the project team thought about developing the oral histories document, we considered how recording histories with staff members could create knowledge that could be transferred about job roles, about job activities, and about accomplishments. And it also has some other good uses. I think these types of recordings, whether they are audio or audiovisual, can help you build an organizational history of your arts and culture organization. We've seen some of these interviews actually be taken and used in exhibits, be used in some of the things that are on organizations' YouTube pages, all those types of things. It can also provide information that can be used to spotlight the accomplishments of senior staff or departing staff. And again, we've seen these be done and then used at retirement celebrations and that type of thing. what I really like about this document, and as you walk through it, you'll see what's really helpful is that it covers the why you would want to do oral histories in this space and in this time, how you can do them. And there are a lot of really good things about the concept and the sort of method of doing them, but we also see guidance on the equipment you can use. So that's important to know about, and we have some really good information that's available there. Um, and then along with the equipment guidance, which I think is good because it's just really brief, but it's quite helpful, it's how to preserve and store the histories. And just the idea of making sure you have safe digital preservation of these files is important. There's a short section on concluding thoughts, and in addition to the bibliography that we have about the overall project, there is a bibliography or further reading on doing oral histories that is available as well. So this is real interesting because I feel like it's a very complete document, and we have seen people using it outside of using it for succession planning, but using it in general for doing oral histories and those types of projects. So moving on from that, the next piece is this calendar for or guidance for the first 30, 60, 90 days after starting a new job. And I'll tell you that this has been one of the most popular resources we've introduced at our presentations and at our workshops. And this is something that definitely I hope will answer Heath's question. What we do is we find out suggested tasks and point of understanding to consider when you're stepping into a new role. And we look at a couple of columns here. People, the sort of relationships. We have policies, processes, and programs. And then what are the priorities? This is so that new staff can make space for both gathering information and sorting through their approach to the responsibilities of their role and the knowledge transfer process. Overall, I would say that we can recommend that the first 30 days be devoted toward discovery about the people in the organization, the workings and policies of the organization, and then the priorities that you need to work with as you move forward. Then the next 30 days, the mid period here, is for analyzing and clarifying your role and trying to do, in the case of collections, an assessment of the collections and what areas might need special attention or more investigation, and then calendaring some of the things to work on in the future. So what is a useful framework for prioritizing your work? Do you feel like it's the importance or urgency of some activities related to your collection or related to your upcoming arts calendar? Or do you think it is the idea of what is the impact and effort we're having? And finally, the last 30 days of this onboarding process can be for planning forward. What are some of the things you're going to do as you've landed in the position, you've been able to use some of these steps to make yourself comfortable, and then how are you going to move forward from that? I think the setup of this document is very easy to follow, and I think it can be used quite well. And we've heard about people using this in a couple of different cases. One, when they bring in someone new to the organization, but also when somebody makes an internal job transition within their existing organization. I think this is really helpful as well. So again, simple, but I think very, very effective. Another one of our pieces that we want to look at is file naming strategies to aid in succession planning. And I will tell you that this was something that existed at Lyrasis, but we didn't know that it was going to be connected to this project until we had a chance to hear on our listening sessions, and in the initial presentations to introduce our resources at the beginning of this year, we were hearing absolute horror stories about staff not being able to locate important documents and projects from retired or departed colleagues. Things had just disappeared, or they had such a strange file name that nobody could sort of crack the code and be able to get to them. So we asked my colleague, Lee Grinstead, who's at Lyrasis and has been helping organizations develop file naming protocols and processes for years, to help us by putting together a short and, again, simple document on file naming. This tool started out as something to use when you were doing digital project management, but it can help a lot as a cross-organization standard when you're developing file names. And I think that is really important. Thinking about what are some organizational standards that you can develop so we don't have everybody naming things under their own protocols, but we have a protocol across the organization. So this is a little bit maybe more dense with information than a couple of the other resources that we have, but I think it's definitely a good one to look at. And with that, I'm going to turn things back over for the last of these resources on this page to Dyani to talk about that wonderful collection of plans and policies.
Yes, so as Tom mentioned, this is, sorry, trying to get it to a more normal size. This is a document this is another one that really has a lot of, hopefully, use outside of the initiatives of succession planning and knowledge transfer, but has a really crucial role to play in that process as well. Having written policies and procedures and other, written planning type documents in place governing collections, care, and management is going to be critical in providing consistency, and having those practices articulated in writing really helps all of the organization's staff and volunteers know how their predecessors determined they should carry out these activities, even if the individuals are not around to ask directly. So the idea of policies in particular being formal documents that have been kind of granted this very intentional level of agreement and approval, providing overarching standards and guidelines for decision making, these can be really helpful in carrying out activities of collections, care, and management on an ongoing basis. So what this document is, it's pretty straightforward, but really it just goes through and defines many of the most common written policies, procedures, and other types of planning documents for particularly collecting institutions, museums, libraries, archives, historical sites, but there may very well be relevance here to other organizations with collections as well. So it defines the different types of documents, and then what is hopefully really helpful is links out to examples of actual policies in all of these different categories. I tried to find documents, policies from different types of organizations. So we would have some from small museums, some from academic institutional archives, et cetera, et cetera. Now, with a document this link heavy, there is always a certain buyer beware element to these are all documents that are they are, or at least were as of when I put this together a few months ago, fully available on the internet. So it is entirely possible that over time links may break, and we will absolutely try our best to keep it active and up to date. But yeah, I think hopefully, particularly for some types, hopefully not making y'all seasick with the scrolling, but I think particularly for some types of written materials like cyclical maintenance plans, you know, that is going to have to be very particular to your organization. But on the other hand, it can be really helpful to see how other organizations have handled this, and to be able to have something to base off of. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint for just a moment to carry us on to our next area of resources. This is the additional resources. Tom is going to talk about the bibliography we are working on, which is also a ongoing living document. And then I'm going to talk about a separate resource, but with connections that will hopefully be clear in a moment. So let me get back to the website. And we'll go to the bibliography first.
Okay. Thank you for doing this, Dyani. It's a lot of jumping between resources in our PowerPoint, and I am really glad you're doing it. Otherwise, this might have had to have been a 2-hour webinar. But we have this succession planning bibliography that we have put together. And the thing that I think is the most interesting about this is it is, as Dyani just mentioned, constantly growing. You'll see as you go through this that we have a number of articles specifically related to or written by arts and culture professionals, as well as some excellent general publications on the subject. And, Crystal Goldman has written a lot about this for the Association of Research Libraries. And she has, we have a number of her articles listed here, but we have a number of articles and pieces that were written as academic studies or written simply as articles about succession planning projects that happened at different arts organizations as well. We definitely are planning to have more additions to this. I'm hoping that we may even have more additions by later this month. And you can see also that it is something where it's a combination of journal articles, sections from books, and blog posts as well. And one of the pieces in here that we definitely have mentioned is that the organizations at a crossroads is listed in here. So with that in mind, this is one where I'd say, plan to come back on a monthly basis to take a look at this. And I will hand things back over to Dyani to talk about their collections management policy toolkit.
Yes, and I want to also I really want to shout out my other colleague, Alana Schaefer, who Alana and Tom did most of the heavy lifting on putting together this bibliography, as well as many of the other resources as well. Alana and also the Conservation Center's executive director, Michelle Eisenberg, have had a huge hand in pulling all of these together. So yes, we in sharing resources, we're going to close out on something a little different. This is something that was previously in place previous to this project, also funded with funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. The Conservation Center put together this online toolkit for building collections management policies. So it is, with absolutely no affiliation to this company, we have described it along the way as or we hope anyway, that it is like TurboTax for creating a collections management policy. So it's a completely free tool. It walks you through every aspect of building a collections management policy. This too, everything in it is completely customizable, but also there is generated suggested language. It is meant to be usable by small to mid-sized collecting organizations of basically any type, but it's going to be most relevant, I think, for museums, libraries, archives, and historical sites with collections. And yeah, it really, this front page kind of says it all right up here. It guides you step by step through the process of creating a collections management policy. Our team is available if you have questions about the tool or about any of the functionality, but just wanted to make sure that you knew about this resource as well. It is, as I'm sure Camilla popped into the chat, yeah, it is a different website, different entirely actually from the Conservation Center's website, cmptoolkit.org. Yeah, hopefully it will be of some value to your organizations. And if you are working on creating or significantly updating a collections management policy as part of an overall kind of knowledge transfer initiative, I hope that you will let us know about your experiences and share how that is going for your organization. So I lied. We have one more resource to share. It's actually the newest resource up on the website. And that is, I think I'm going to mostly pass this over to Tom, but just to give a very brief intro, this is a document where really all of the other stuff that we've been talking about along the way is coalesced into we are calling it a resource roadmap. So trying to really in one document walk through kind of the overall framework of succession planning. So
All
yeah,
right.
I'm not sure what else you wanted to add about that, Tom.
Yeah, if we can go to this resource, one of the things that I really like is how CCAHA staff sort of designed it. It is definitely a way that you can get to all of the things that we talked about, and many of you may remember the old AAA triptychs, the map booklets that they had, and we use that as sort of a basis of our design. It can sometimes be a little bit of a long and winding road to go through succession planning. So what we have here is sort of before, during, and after stages. The document looks at the before stage, preparing for future staff transitions, whether you have one that's coming up relatively immediately, or if you just want to build out your plan and start preparing. It considers the during, working through a staff change, working through a staff transition in process. And so this is something where if you're coming to this as you're seeing staff changes at your organization right now, this is where you can step in. And then finally, the after is sort of reflecting on staff transitions and looking at, again, reaching out to partners, thinking about how can new technology help this, and then thinking about, and this is something that we've talked about all along, documenting and reviewing your work so that you don't have some of the speed bumps or the hiccups that you might have had when you go through this process again. Each section definitely ties back and is linked back to the resources we've covered today through hyperlinks in the document. And it includes a lot of, as you'll see with the twists and turns in the road here, a lot of other suggested activities where we might not have the whole, a full-blown resource on it, but we talk about some steps that you might be interested in looking at as you are moving throughout the before, during, and after of the process. So again, this one is simple, easy information, and really graphically well designed. And with that in mind, we wanted to leave time for questions. And we have a couple of questions that we wanted to ask all of you. And I think Dyani is going to lead some of this sort of give and take and discussion that we might have. And I think we'll find all of that through the chat.
Yes, so we don't have a huge amount of time left. It looks like we have just about 6 minutes, so not sure, I think maybe the main thing that we were really interested in focusing on, somewhat selfishly perhaps, is what else would it be helpful if we are continuing to create additional resources? One thing that has already come up, it's definitely already on the list, is we have the 30, 60, 90, but that's more for, the individual coming into a new role. We are also definitely interested in creating some additional onboarding tools for more, from the kind of hiring institutions side to help with that from that side. So that's one thought there. But based on the way that this program is set up, if you have thoughts, please enter them in the chat. And because we do have just a limited amount of time, this will be on the next slide too, but I also just wanted to share my email. If any of these questions you need a little more time to think about, you can definitely follow up with us afterwards. And yeah, we're getting some really great, that's an excellent question. Grace asks in the chat, do you have an estimated amount of time that filling out these templates might take a small archive to complete? In other words, should I have started 3 years ago? Well, I kind of I enjoy some yard work now and then. And what's the cliched saying then? The perfect time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is tomorrow. No, of course, if you didn't start 3 years ago, then jumping in as soon as you are able to carve out some time would be fantastic. I think it's a very short and sweet document, but I think really spending some time with that 10 things you can do now to support succession planning might be a helpful way to kind of wrap your mind around the process of what this might look like. I know we at the Conservation Center, we are trying really hard to practice what we preach. And so we have taken it on as an internal project to try to do one of those 10 items internally, everyone on the staff, on some regular basis. It's not necessarily going to be one a month, but definitely at the very least one a quarter, with the goal of rolling all of that together. But yeah, as far as overall timeline, I think that's going to be a challenge. It's going to be like everything different for all organizations, but I'm not sure if you had any further thoughts, Tom.
Yeah, I think exactly what you were saying about the top 5 and 10 things, bringing those into staff meetings, bringing those into the next board meeting, taking a look at is there an opportunity in a staff meeting to say, okay, what's everybody doing for file naming right now, and thinking about how can we put something that goes across all departments in. I think a lot of this can be done in some of your regular meetings, or at least the flag can be waved to make people aware of it. And then some of the pieces that Dyani went over at the beginning, where you're able to fill those in, a few of them, especially that risk matrix, might not take as much time. The other ones might be something where you would say, okay, I want to start on these now. I know it's not going to be immediate, but how can we work from there? Dyani, I see that we're getting a bunch of different things that are coming up in the chat. One that I like from Pamela was external communications regarding the departure of key personnel. I would really like to see if there's a way we can, if not develop something on our own on that, think about in the bibliography, looking for some pieces that have been developed by people who do everything from public relations to crisis communications, and think about how we can get some of that in there. So thank you for that, Pamela. Let's see what else we have here.
I want to just respond to Caroline's question as well about where to keep these resources once you've started filling out the templates and working on analyzing your job requirements and all of that. I'm going to give the kind of wishy-washy standard answer is that it's going to depend on your institution. But one thing that I would definitely recommend, and this is another thing that at the Conservation Center we are working on right now, is setting up some sort of institutional intranet. And that sounds fancy and sophisticated if you don't have something like that in place, but really it can just be a intentionally organized, structured location where your files, your institutional files, are saved. You know, we use SharePoint for our files, and we're just going to be building out our own institutional intranet within SharePoint. So it doesn't have to be some fancy separate high-tech thing, but as with everything else in all of these resources, consistency is the key. You know, set some guidelines for where these materials are stored and try to enforce them to the extent that that's possible. Try to get everyone on board with it, and that will be hopefully a key to success. I noticed that Heath, and we are running up against time, but I noticed that Heath also asked about grants available for implementation of these initiatives. I'm not actually, so we received grants to build the initiatives. I'm not sure, Tom, if you think that a preservation assistance grant might be appropriate for,
Yes.
so
I
I
was.
think that it might be kind of a new concept for them, but the National Endowment for the Humanities has a grant category called preservation assistance grants. I think they still have for small to mid-sized institutions. It's a up to, but certainly doesn't have to be a $10,000 grant, zero match required. So it's just funding from the NEH. You don't have to put up anything on the institutional side. And, you know, one thing that you might be able to do is put in a grant application through that to hire a consultant to help coordinate and walk your organization through some of these steps. Sometimes this type of, the work itself isn't challenging. It's not that the resources, you know, you can do it, but sometimes it's having that external person come in just to be kind of the coordinator, the connection to resources. And those grants they are typically due, I think, early to mid-January. So
yes.
keep a lookout when fall hits. And
and there'll be new guidelines up. And yeah, I think that is exactly the type of grant I would suggest that we look at, that people look at, especially because there is the opportunity to use the grant to help develop policies in general, and potentially this can be another one of the policies that you could work with. And thank you for putting that up. And yeah, I think we did have a lot of these resources to go through, and so we didn't have maybe as much time for questions, but please feel free to get a hold of Dyani or myself, and Michelle, who is the executive director, has been working on the project as well. So really there is a whole team that's working together that can help you out. The other thing before I close, I wanted to say, both CCAHA and Lyrasis work with organizations on those preservation assistance grants, and we actually even have little webinars and other things to tell people about them. So those will come up in the fall as well.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us. And again, if you are watching this recording in the future, I'm saying this while the slide with our contact info is up. So please feel free to reach out if you want a copy of the presentation. For all of you who registered in advance, we'll be sending that out with all of the links embedded. So thanks all, and have a lovely rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, Dyani. Thanks, Camilla.